So we've been discussing three main Buddhist schools that have different approach to how one arrives at mindfulness awareness. The schools are Theravada, Zen, and Tibetan Buddhism. Different ways of talking about mindfulness awareness in these three schools reflect on how they go about practicing it. This, in turn, has reflection on their associated neural dynamics of mindfulness as a process when we study people who are practicing according to these different approaches. The word Theravada means doctrine of the elders. It is the oldest school of Buddhism that survived to the present time. Theravada Buddhism is strongest in Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, Myanmar, or Burma. It had the greatest influence on the insight tradition of the US. Theravadan approach puts a lot of emphasis on achieving a perfect, stable shamatha, often with a focus of breath, sensations, or body sensations. Achieving perfect shamatha requires developing samadhi, which could be understood as a one-pointed concentration on an object or absorption. There are 4 stages of developing strong samadhi called jhanas. We won't go into this in any great detail, as this isn't necessarily emphasized in secular mindfulness, although it is useful to be aware or familiar with the terms, as you might come across it as you sort of read or you study mindfulness on your own journey. The point or purpose is that shamatha stage of practice has a great importance in Theravadan approach and needs to be very developed for practicing vipassana or insight, for the development of the wisdom aspect. Another important point in Theravadan approach, perfect shamatha or samadhi is only possible if one minimizes the mind's distractions, including thoughts and sense objects. So Theravadan practitioners put a lot of emphasis on avoiding stimuli and activities that might induce desire, attachment, in particular. Moral and ethical code conduct is a central part of their approach. Chan is a Chinese name for Zen. Chan first appeared in China and then migrated to Japan as Zen. In contrast to Theravada, the Zen approach de-emphasizes effort in meditation and striving. In achieving particular states such as jhanas, the main practice in Japanese Zen is called zazen. The precise meaning and method of zazen varies from school to school, but in general it can be regarded as a means of insight into the nature of existence. In the Soto school of Japan, zazen is the practice of just sitting, that is suspending all judgmental thinking and letting words, ideas, images, and thoughts just pass by without getting involved in them. Soto Zen approach had a very big influence, for example, on Kabat-Zinn and his own personal meditation practices, according to the to my readings of what's in the literature anyway, and hence influenced clinical and secular mindfulness the most. Tibetan Buddhism is very varied, but the main characteristic of the Tibetan approach is mixing it up. That is in contrast to the Theravadan approach, where tranquility of the mind is achieved by reducing sensory input. The Tibetan approach is to expose oneself to pleasant and unpleasant stimuli and experiences to develop a stable, contented mind. It is not the stimuli or sense data that are the problem, but rather our reactions to and our relationship with them. The most relevant approaches to what we'll discuss in sort of future lessons and content are Dzogchen and mudra, which have a lot of similarities with Soto Zen. The difference between the schools and their approach to practice is also based on differences between them in how they conceptualize our ability to be mindfully aware when we haven't even started practicing. These two approaches can be categorized as two trajectories of awareness. The first one starts with rudimentary ability to be aware, which then allows us to develop self-awareness, leading to what we call, for example, in sort of neuroscience, meta-awareness. And this approach is mainly used in Theravada Buddhism. This is also an approach that is central to Western philosophical tradition and current developmental psychology, for example. However, the approach in Dzogchen and Mudra of Tibetan Buddhism, as well as Chan and Zen, and also we find this approach in Greek Stoics such as Pyrrho and Epicurus, and they influence phenomenologists. For example, Edmund Husserl had a different reflection on how we achieve the quality of mindful awareness. So what this suggests is that we already have the qualities of mindful awareness, but is obscured by judgments, our desired, and other obscurations. And what practice does with different methods, it simply reveals this bare reflexive awareness, and natural qualities shine through when we're able to suspend the clouds or see beyond them. In Buddhism, these two approaches are often referred to as gradual or sudden awakening. So what are the clouds that obscure the sun? It's the experience of self as independent, separate entity. Discursive thinking that we've spoke about in previous lectures, and the resulting confusion in cognitive areas due to the mind-brain operating through attachment and aversion, which we've discussed previously as well. However, we need to bear in mind that gradual and sudden paths are not absolute dichotomy. Different schools fall on different continuum on different spectrum. We could use a combination of these approaches that either presuppose gradual or sudden awakening. The ability to cut through depends on the quality of one's mindfulness, as well as insight into nature of the situation, which might take some time to cultivate. More schools and tradition of Buddhism are structured as gradual path, but they don't exclude the possibility of abrupt qualitative deepening at any stage of the path, or even with a single meditation session that cuts through, for example, a metaphorical onion abruptly. Importantly, there's always a possibility of regress if mindfulness is not maintained on the moment-by-moment basis. So let's look for examples. We've talked about this before, mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBPsS, implicitly takes an innatist approach. So we've sort of seen that in sort of quotes it quotes the Serenity Prayer, for example. We ask for the grace to accept serenity, the things that cannot be changed, and the courage to change the things that should be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish one from the other. So where do we find this grace, this courage, this wisdom? At some level, we already have all these qualities. Our task is to realize them, make them real. And our way is none other than moment by moment mindfulness awareness. So in brevity, in relation to mindful awareness, as a result, mindful-based stress reduction uses the language of cultivating at times, but it implicitly adopts the innatist approach to achieving mindful awareness. That is, it presupposes that all the qualities that characterize mindful awareness are already there from the beginning. We just need to realize them. Although you could suggest that MBPsS follows traditional practice trajectory on 4 foundations of mindfulness to actualize or reveal mindfulness awareness that are part of the constructive path. It implicitly holds that mindfulness awareness can be simply dropped at any moment, either during formal practice or meditation or daily living, if one can cut through the metaphorical line of confusion. So, mindfulness is often spoken of as the heart of Buddhist meditation, But in essence, you could make the point that it has little to do with Buddhists per se, and everything to do with wakefulness and awareness. And different Buddhist influences shape the definition of mindfulness as put forward and developed by John Kabat-Zinn and MBPsS. And as a result, whereas most Buddhists use the term mindfulness to refer to an ability and the process, the Western secular definition includes ability, process, and result. In the context of Buddhist debates on the nature of mindful awareness and how it's achieved, mindfulness practice in a secular context could be thought of as the development of innate capacity to be aware by refining our natural ability to pay and sustain attention. The more we are able to overcome habitual fixation, distraction, confusion, the more these natural qualities can come through, can shine through, so to speak.